Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a really fascinating topic, Acquired Savant Syndrome. It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But it's very much a real-world thing. Our mission, really, is to go beyond just the surface observations and dive deep into source material that explores the, let's say, the energetic factors, the subtle side of things. We're looking at people who, maybe after a head injury or a stroke, suddenly gain these incredible skills, art, music, math, sometimes even when they had a cognitive disability before.
Exactly. And the sources we're drawing from, they're quite specific, mostly hypnotic investigation protocols. So we're stepping into some, well, unusual territory here. We're looking at claims about energy restructuring, even external influences. But, and this is really important, we have to keep a critical eye. The sources themselves warn about this. The information needs careful filtering.
Absolutely. We're not just listing claims. We want to see if there's maybe a pattern, a kind of blueprint in this material. Why does the brain suddenly seem to rewire itself like this? What's the role of maybe outside forces? And, what can it teach us about our own potential? Hopefully without the head injury part. Okay, so let's unpack this. It's such a paradox, right? Trauma usually means loss, but here, damage seems to unlock something amazing. What do the sources say is happening on that subtle level when ASS kicks in?
Well, the sources describe this energetic mechanism that's kind of counterintuitive. The idea is that the pre-existing condition, the congenital disability, ironically, seems to have created a sort of gap, an opening in the subtle field. And this opening allows for completely new connections between physical neurons, yes, but also subtle neurons, connections that just weren't possible before.
Ah, so it's like the potential was there but blocked.
Pretty much. Think of it like the brain hardware was fine, but the operating system had locked files because of the condition. The trauma then acts like a huge forced reboot. What emerges is described as a new configuration of the whole nervous system. And this configuration transfers from the subtle field right into our 3D physical reality.
That's wild. A subtle blueprint driving this physical change. The sources really zoom in on the thalamus, don't they? They describe it visually, like shining or glowing, especially on the right side. What's the significance of the thalamus lighting up like that?
Yeah, the thalamus is key. It's the brain's main sensory relay station, right? All the info sight, sound, touch, coordination, it all gets integrated there before going elsewhere. So this shining or potentialization, as the sources put it, especially on the right side, it just opens up massive new bandwidth for things like motor skills, complex thought, even expressing oneself. It's like sensory integration dialed up to 11.
So it's not just new information appearing. It's the capacity to receive and integrate it that explodes.
Precisely. And the sources link this to the corpus callosum, too, the part connecting the two brain hemispheres. They suggest congenital conditions might alter this structure. And that change could affect how the person connects to their own subtle bodies right from the start. So the information, the potential was always there inside the mind's library, so to speak. But access was restricted until something, trauma or maybe even intention, flipped that switch.
Okay, that leads us right to the energy body itself. If there's this huge internal shift, how do the chakras, the energy centers, react in Acquired Savant Syndrome?
The internal changes definitely mirror outwards. The sources talk about a really dramatic change in the 7 main chakras. They seem to expand, yeah, but they also form these secondary structures. The term used is a bit strange, varices, but in a good sense.
Hold on. Varices, like varicose veins. That sounds
Yeah.
not good. Can you clarify what they might mean by that energetically?
It does sound negative, I agree. But the interpretation in the sources points towards complexity, not dysfunction. Think less bulging veins, more like an incredibly intricate network of vessels, like a superhighway with lots of new on-ramps and off-ramps. This new structure creates this intense potential for both energy input and output across all the centers at once. The energy ports basically get a massive upgrade.
Okay, so the internal engine gets rebuilt, supercharged. Does this massive change always come from within? Or do the sources suggest outside factors can play a role?
Well, the sources lay out 3 possibilities, 3 perceived origins. First, it could be entirely internal, originating within the individual. Second, it could involve external exogenous forces acting on the individual, like a directed energy hit. And the third one is really interesting. The environment itself, like the person is exposed to specific, highly charged vibrational conditions in a certain place.
Let's focus on that second one, the external force, because this is where the material makes some pretty extraordinary claims about intervention, right?
Right. In that scenario, the sources describe an entity or someone. They actually mention the possibility of this being from the Pleiades. This entity supposedly reaches out to the person's essence and deliberately activates the change. flips the switch for them, essentially.
Yeah, okay. Pleiades entities. That's specific.
It is, and this is exactly where we need to hit pause and apply that critical filter we talked about. When you get claims about specific cosmic entities in this type of hypnotic research, you're deep in potentially contaminated territory. It could be the subject's own beliefs bleeding through, or maybe even other entities interfering with the signal. We can't base conclusions on one session mentioning Pleiades. We need patterns, consistency across many, many sessions.
That's a really crucial point. So, okay, let's treat the entity claim as just one example of possible external influence. What does this sudden awakening, however it happens, mean for the person's subliminal self?
The material suggests this activation creates a much more complete energy connection between the physical body and the subliminal part, the deeper self. This subliminal aspect gets fed more energy, more completely. This massively boosts the power of their imagination, their inner world. But interestingly, the path to manifesting this in the 3D world is described as finer but fragile. Huge internal power, but bringing it out consistently is still delicate.
Finer but fragile. So these savants are channeling immense energy, potentially connected in new ways. Do the sources give them a larger role, a purpose here on Earth?
They're seen as part of a structure, yeah. The sources talk about a fine network. These individuals are suggested to be part of Earth's own structural integrity, like they form this very fine energetic grid. They're described as having a deep connection to the planet's essence, almost like they're sparks of the Earth made manifest.
That's quite poetic. It connects to a specific case study in the material, doesn't it? Gerald, the young carpenter in Alaska.
Yes, Gerald. He's presented as a perfect example of this Earth network idea. He's 17, a carpenter, lives in Alaska, and his savant ability is communicating with animals, trees, water, nature itself.
And the source claims he chose this?
That's the claim, yes, that he chose this experience. Apparently, he prefers nature because human interaction is too much for him. He picks up on vibrational alterations in people, which he finds overwhelming, jarring. He specifically chose Alaska for the intense sensory input from the forest, the smells, the air. Paradoxically, that high stimulation gives him the maximum sensation of vitality.
It sounds amazing, incredibly connected. But then the sources drop this bombshell term, manipulation. If it leads to such vitality, why call it manipulation?
That's the ethical crux of it. It's called manipulation because, according to the sources, even if the intent behind the activation is seen as good, like offering the best possible experience, it explicitly does not respect free will. Whether it's trauma acting as the trigger or an alleged entity intervention, it forces the individual onto a specific path. The sources frame it as a kind of consensual manipulation, perhaps, but manipulation all the same because the choice wasn't truly free.
And there's a benefit for the manipulator.
Apparently, yes. The claim is that the entity, the someone doing the activating, gets something out of it. They bathe in the high frequencies that the savant produces, and the savant themselves. Often they're so immersed in this constant state of sensory overload, this perceived fullness, that they might be completely unaware the manipulation is even happening, too saturated to notice.
That definitely adds a darker shade to the picture, and there's mention of a wider control system keeping tabs on these cases.
Yes, the sources allege there's a system monitoring these high-energy savants, the purpose, to test the limits, to see how much energy the human battery, the brain, can actually handle before it hits overload. This constant sensory saturation, driven by that superactivated thalamus, can apparently lead to burnout or even rapid aging. It's like running the system too hot for too long.
Right. So we've seen this path to incredible abilities through trauma, through potential external activation, maybe even manipulation. But what's the takeaway for us, for you listening? Can we reach that kind of plenitude of perception without needing a shock to the system or some dubious external help?
The sources strongly suggest yes, absolutely. There's an alternative path, a non-manipulative one. The goal, that state of plenitude, is achievable. But it has to come through the conscious evolution of consciousness, within our normal carbon body, avoiding that sudden, potentially problematic gap seen in ASS.
And how do we do that? What's required?
It seems to boil down to two key things, two parameters. First, somatic balance. Basically, our physical body sensations need to support our mental activity, like air supporting the voice. And crucially, for this balance, the body needs to be in movement, actual movement, walking, interacting with the real world, not just sitting and experiencing things virtually. That physical engagement is the foundation.
So our modern, often very sedentary, screen-focused lives, they might actually be hindering this potential.
That's exactly what the sources imply. If the body isn't moving, isn't having those real-world sensory experiences, the support for higher mental integration just isn't there. The second key parameter is creating a harmonic circuit. This means getting a continuous, harmonious flow going between our four energy bodies: the mental, the emotional, the sexual, and the physical. When those four are working together smoothly, like four wheels turning in sync, we naturally sustain a much higher integrated energy state.
And this conscious evolution is visualized as a spiral, isn't it? Going inward while the outer expression grows.
That's the image used, yes. It's a constant process of looking inward. And this is where it fundamentally differs from the manipulation aspect we discussed. The absolute key difference is free will. In this conscious inward spiral, you are free to examine your mental and emotional stuff, decide what serves you, what to keep, what to discard. That fuels authentic growth. Manipulation might offer a shortcut to a high state, but it's described as a false sense of vitality because free will was bypassed.
Makes sense. And the importance of real-world experience comes up again here, too.
Emphatically. Multisensory experiences, touch, smell, sight, sound, they're vital for integrating everything and staying in harmony with our essence. And the sources are very clear. Interaction with nature is far more sustaining, more coherent energetically than interaction with human-made environments like cities or screens. Nature provides the purest feedback loop for balancing those four bodies.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, we absolutely have to circle back to that critical caveat you mentioned right at the start. We've talked about some really out there concepts: Pleiades, control systems, Earth sparks. Why is it so vital to be cautious with this information?
Because the method itself, the hypnotic investigation protocol, while it can yield really specific and sometimes compelling data, is known to be inherently, well, flawed is a strong word, but highly susceptible to contamination.
Right, the contamination sources are everywhere, aren't they? The info has to travel through different dimensions, different consciousnesses.
Exactly. It's like the signal can get intercepted or distorted as it travels through the ether. Entities, perhaps with their own agendas, might alter the data, intentionally or not. They might even impersonate the person being investigated to siphon off energy or influence the outcome. And that's not even counting the subject's own mind. Their beliefs, their fears, their mental structure, all of that inevitably colors the information they provide during a session.
So how do researchers using this method try to get reliable data then? What's the ideal protocol according to the sources?
True, rigorous analysis requires a very strict, unified protocol, asking the exact same questions in the same way across hundreds, maybe even thousands, of sessions with completely different people.
That's where the gold nuggets idea comes in, right?
Precisely. You look for the common threads, the information that pops up consistently across all those different sessions, regardless of the individual's background or beliefs. That tiny percentage of consistent data points, those are the gold nuggets. Hurrah. Things like, for example, consistent reports of certain types of interference across many sessions might point to something real. But it highlights why we need extreme caution when looking at very specific, potentially sensational claims from just one or a handful of sessions, like some of the details surrounding acquired savant syndrome.
What a journey. We've looked at this incredible energetic rewiring in acquired savant syndrome, the thalamus lighting up, the chakras transforming, that deep earth connection. And we've also touched on the really complex, even unsettling side of it: external influence, potential manipulation for high frequencies.
But the most empowering takeaway, I think, is the alternative path. The sources suggest our highest potential, that state of plenitude, isn't dependent on shock or manipulation. It's available through conscious, consistent effort. It really seems to hinge on that balance. Physical movement, real multisensory engagement, especially with nature, and working towards that inner harmony between our mental, emotional, sexual, and physical selves.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If conscious movement and real interaction with the natural world are fundamental keys to unlocking our full human potential, how much might our modern, often sedentary indoor lives be unintentionally limiting the true capacity of our own thalamus right now? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.